This tutorial is for 4th grade, Module 5, Lesson 24. In this lesson, we're going to look at fractions where the numerator is greater than the denominator. We're going to decompose those fractions into whole numbers and sometimes leftover fractions. If I look at example A, I'm starting with 11/3. The key is to focus on the denominator. Since I'm working with thirds, I know that it takes 3/3 to make one whole. I have 11/3, so I'm going to skip count by threes or think of my multiples of 3 to figure out how many wholes I can make. Well, to make one whole, I would need 3/3. To make 2 wholes, I would need 6/3. To make 3 wholes, I would need 9/3. To make 4 wholes, I would need 12/3. Well, I only have 11/3, so I need to stop at the 9/3. That tells me with 9/3, I can make 3 wholes. Since I have 11/3 altogether, I still have 2/3 that I didn't use. I'll combine that fraction with my whole number for a final answer of 3 2/3. That means that 11/3 is the same thing as 3 wholes and 2/3. Let's look at example B. This time I have 12/5. Well, it takes 5/5 to make a whole. So I need to figure out how many wholes I can make. Well, if it takes 5/5 to make one whole, it would take 10/5 to make 2 wholes and 15/5 to make 3 wholes. Well, I only have 12/5. That means I need to stop at the 10/5 to make my whole numbers. And that means I have 2 more fifths left over since I had 12 to start with. I'm going to take those 10/5 and show that as 2 wholes, and then I still have my 2/5. Altogether, 12/5 is the same thing as 2 wholes and 2/5. If we look at problem C, I have 10 halves. Well, it takes 2 halves to make a whole. So if I have 2 halves for one whole, 4 halves would make 2 wholes. 6 halves would make 3 wholes, 8 halves would make 4 wholes, and 10 halves would make 5 wholes. So I'm going to use all of my halves to make my whole numbers. That means I don't have any halves left over. 10 halves is the same thing as 5 wholes. I don't have any halves left over, so 10 halves is the same thing as 5 wholes. This shows how the key to decomposing these fractions is to focus on the denominator and think of how many wholes you can make based on that denominator.